help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And today we are going to talk about the 1-year anniversary of Dobbs. And if you are listening to this podcast, the day that it comes out, which is Tuesday, June 20th, this is also the official release date of the great book we've been talking about for 2 months, The Scalpel and the Soul by Dr. Haywood Robinson and his late wife, Dr. Noreen Johnson, both married abortion doctors, and Noreen was from Trinidad and Tobago, Haywood's from Los Angeles, and it's a wild ride. So order that now. You can get it on Amazon, but it's better if you get it directly from us. Number one, you support our mission. Number two, you will get one of the few remaining hardback copies. We only have 5,000. They're almost gone, of Scalpel and the Soul. And Haywood will sign that. So be sure to order directly from us at 40daysforlifegear.com, 40daysforlifegear.com, and you will get your book. So June 20th, today, the release of Scalpel and the Soul. This weekend, the anniversary of Dobbs, June the 24th, one of the greatest days in American history. And we will be in Washington, D.C. I'll be speaking at the Lincoln Memorial. Look forward to seeing thousands of you come out as we partner with our friends at Students for Life and Live Action to celebrate life on a day when the Supreme Court finally corrected their errors. So to join me on this important podcast where we are going to discuss the 8 things we know now since Dobbs overturned Roe, and they're all positive things, and a few of them are comical. So with me is Heather Gardner. How are you? Welcome back.
Glad to be back.
I know recording the podcast is one of your favorite obligations at 40 Days for Life.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
I'll take it. Wonderful. And Steve, welcome back to Texas.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, especially as we get ready for the 4th of July. There's nothing that says freedom like the 4th of July, and there's nothing that says freedom like Texas.
I need to be clear with the viewer right now. Steve has no interest in the 1-year anniversary of Dobbs or Haywood's book whatsoever. Everything is a countdown for the 4th of July. And it's very random. And I think it's funny because I think I mean this as a compliment. You don't get like excited about stuff. Okay, so we've done movie podcasts where we've had to, as a moral obligation to society and people at large and to everybody who lived through the 90s, we've had to insult you because you haven't seen any good movies out of the 90s. And still to this day, you come on, you're like, I'm going to watch that. You never do. You have no interest. So we have to criticize you for that, which you deserve. And you're not bothered by it. You don't care. You roll your eyes and you go home and you say, Sean's an idiot. I'm not watching Shawshank Redemption, which just sounds like...
You're not bothered by it.
I'm bothered by it, but he's not.
I watch documentaries and read books because I'm at a higher plane of
One of your favorite documentaries is Tommy Boy, if I remember correctly.
A lot of people go to college for 7 years.
Yeah, called Doctors. So that's a great movie, by the way. So I'm surprised that you're totally pumped about the 4th of July. And since I've known you, I have a question. Is it because, number one, you love our country and you want to blow stuff up with fireworks, and that's great?
Yes and yes, but continue with the list because there's probably some more yeses coming.
I think there's an X factor that we don't have in Texas that Northerners have, which is you get 2 weeks of decent weather called summer every year. So in Wisconsin, 4th of July also represents It's like Christmas to us. Like it's going to be 60 degrees and not 85.
When summer and the 4th of July both fall on a weekend, that's the best.
It's perfect. And one of my favorite presidents, John Adams, I suggest you read the book. Actually, there was a series on him also with Paul Giamatti. Very good. John Adams has a great quote. We're going to put it on the screen. And he's talking about the 4th of July, what became the 4th of July. We'll get to that in a moment. But he said this on July 2nd of 1776, a great year for our country, a horrible year for Robert and all of his ancestors as they had a tough time wearing red coats in the woods of New York and Virginia where we could easily shoot them, but we were grateful for that. John Adams said, "It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore."
Yeah, that should be our national motto.
John
That's
Adams,
the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Yes, sir. That's the 4th of July. So, annoying 4th of July guy who is out there and is like, not really the 4th of July. So they signed the Declaration of Independence on and debated it on July 2nd. That's the big day. There were minor edits that drove Thomas Jefferson nuts because he's like, this is actually a perfect document and you're screwing it up. But they had minor edits and it was finalized on July 4th. That's the day that they confirmed this is the final document. So you will get annoying. I think they all hate our country, but people that are like, we really shouldn't celebrate on the 4th of July. We should celebrate on the 2nd of July. But the 2nd of July is a very important day in U.S. history also, because if you refer back to the great story of Independence Day, July 2nd is the day that the aliens arrive.
Yeah, and thank goodness we had Randy Quaid to bail us out of that one.
He really came through. Cousin Eddie really came through.
I didn't know if he had it in him. You know, some of his previous body of work on the resume didn't suggest that he was going to be the George Washington for the 20th century, but yet we're all here today thanks to his fearless leadership.
And Heather believes in aliens.
Yeah, actually, I do.
So you say that like it's controversial. I want to kind of take it a step further. I'm very pro-alien. I think they could teach us a lot. If they came and took over, they could maybe correct some of our confusion.
Yeah, they can correct our confusion, but we're not confused. I should say the other people that we disagree with would say they're not confused. We're the ones who are confused. So whose confusion would be corrected with the aliens?
The aliens would mediate, and the aliens would side on natural law. Because the aliens, they know that there's, only two sexes. The aliens are definitely pro-life. They reproduce like crazy, which is how they were able to really be a huge threat in Independence Day. So I'm confident in the values of the aliens. I know that's very naive, but I don't know if we'll need Will Smith and Harry Connick Jr. and Randy Quaid and Bill Pullman to bail us out.
Yeah, but Will Smith says welcome to Earth. So who's going to welcome the aliens to Earth?
Well, it won't have to be the military. It'll just be like it'll be like a reporter,
So are they coming? They're not invading. They're evangelists. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, they're like missionaries. They're like, they have this great planet. So the environmentalists would be very pro-alien because you have this great planet, but y'all are a bunch of weirdos. If you remember the ending of the great book by Walker Piercy, Lost in the Cosmos, the aliens actually decide not to invade Earth in order to protect their women.
Yes.
So, it was they sort of monitored our culture and thought, I don't know if we should go there.
So the aliens then, are they free of original sin, or they've sinned and they've been redeemed? Like who took on, like Christ didn't take on the alien body to redeem?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're free from original sin.
Okay.
They're not humans, so they're still under us, right? But they're a little bit more advanced than like your smartest dog. So they
made it here before we made it to their planet.
Correct. They I don't know. Maybe they've Googled. They got some technology, but they made it here. They're not coming in like those cool spaceships from Independence Day. They're coming in kind of just like lame, whatever their version of like
space ATV.
Yeah, like an average car in the early 80s, like a Toyota Tercel spaceship version.
My first car.
I know. That's why I'm giving you a reference I knew you would know. So they're coming in that version, like a 1983 Tercel to Earth, but they know natural law. They don't have a full conscience, but they know that there's a natural order. And I would say even a natural orderer. So they believe in God. They know that God exists. So they would come and just kind of straighten us out, but not really be a threat.
So they're coming around the 4th of July is what we have to look forward to.
No,
We
I
just
don't know when
what
they're
year.
coming.
No, they're
I'm saying in
definitely-
the movie they came on July 2nd.
They have to come on the 4th of July because that's the one night a year where you see stuff in the sky and you don't question whether it's a UFO, just some redneck shooting off fireworks.
Here's what I like about that movie, among many other things, Independence Day. Great 4th of July movie that everyone should watch. It's the subtle sort of pounding the chest of the American, which I support, of the whole world revolves around us. Mm-hmm. Like even the aliens are going to come on our Independence Day. They don't care about any of the other countries. And the other countries, they didn't care. They all came together and helped us kill the aliens.
It's like we went one time, Robert if you're new to the podcast, Robert from London, our director of international campaigns, he came over and we were doing something together just like in the evening, this place here called Santa's Wonderland. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
And there's like the hayride and everything leads up to the celebration of the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But then to cap it off, it's got like a America, love it or leave it or something like that.
No, it's God Bless America.
Okay.
and I have some issues with that as well. So Santa's Wonderland, which is great, and wonderful Christian family that owns it, they end with the resurrection and the lights light up and Jesus is resurrecting. I think even they throw in the ascension. He goes all the way to heaven. But the lights just take you up and it says Jesus is risen. Even though it's Christmas, he's born earlier in the displays, not to get too into the weeds on this. So then they end with the resurrection. And then after that, the grand finale of the Christmas lights is God Bless America. And Robert just became undone on the
Land of the free because of the brave. I think that's what did
it
him
is.
in. Land
That's
of the
what
free
it is. And we
because
said,
of the brave.
See, Robert, see? That's a tribute to all of, the evil people in England that we had to kill so that we could get rid of tyranny. And even the Christmas lights are illustrating that.
His ancestors paid the price for that land of the free because of the brave display.
Robert's not here to defend himself, so
No.
it's a perfect time to talk about him. He said to me one time that my understanding of American history is inaccurate.
Oh.
And he said it with his cool, proper accent. He's like, just like, you're nothing. You're an idiot imbecile from East Texas, which has a lot of truth to it. But he would give me no specifics. I was like, so did we steal the colonies from you? Did we actually lose the war and we just believe that we won it? He's kind of like annoying 4th of July guy who just runs around saying we should be celebrating on July 2nd.
Yeah, we need to do a deep dive with Robert on or off the podcast. I don't care, but I want to get his perspective on the history of the greatest land on earth.
Yes, and you'll be seeing more of Robert soon on the podcast, FYI. Okay, so I know we covered a lot in that section. Besides Independence Day, I will recommend, and you can feel free to recommend before we get into the topic, best 4th of July movies. Independence Day, Top Gun 1 and 2, and any other day of the year. And of course, The Patriot with Mel Gibson to reference Robert's ancient ancestors getting killed with an axe by a river. Mel Gibson does a great job of that multiple times in that movie.
Yeah, I've seen Top Gun too, so I'm making some progress.
I have a suggestion for you that I
All
thought
right.
you were going to think of. Major League.
As a 4th of July movie.
4th of July movie. It's baseball.
Yeah, that movie is fantastic. I haven't watched it for a long time for moral reasons.
Are you
but
telling me Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?
What's that? There's all those services and all the movies that I want to watch from the 80s and 90s that I've actually seen, like Major League. Like somehow the Christian editing companies have not done the Christian recut of Major League.
Is it VidAngel?
Yeah.
VidAngel will do it. Of course,
I
with
hope
Major
so.
League, the half the movie's gone.
This is our plea. If anybody is watching, has any connection with VidAngel, please get us a family-friendly version of Major League.
Yeah, it's a lot of editing. But I haven't seen that movie in probably 20 years, but it's...
So this ties out together with the 4th of July, I suppose. That movie reminds me of my grandfather, who was questionable in many ways, but an awesome grandpa. And we would go up, in Wisconsin, we call it up north. It's like past the point of civilization. We'd spend the day fishing with him. We'd spend the night watching Major League. And then the next day, he'd give us a brick of firecrackers, the keys to an ATV, and say, go have fun.
And a 6-pack of beer!
That's right. Happy 4th of July, America.
That's awesome. Oh, that's great. One final 4th of... Do you have any 4th of July movies?
Well, I was going to say Top Gun and Top Gun 2, so there you go. Top Gun Maverick. So, yeah.
So good. Thank you, Tom Cruise. I know you're weird, but God bless you. So if you haven't seen this, I know we keep coming back to this on the podcast, but this is really going to break my heart. A great 4th of July movie, The Sandlot.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And the best 4th of July song, the Ray Charles version of
Yes.
America the Beautiful, which is the greatest song ever recorded, best scene of the movie.
Awesome. Can never figure out why they didn't make a sequel to that. It would have made just like $1 billion.
They did, and it was like direct to DVD.
Oh, yeah, no, you can't do that. You got to do a real Sandlot with like real actors. That's a great movie. It's aged well too. My kids love The Sandlot.
It's super fun. Wendy Peppercorn. Peppercorn?
Yeah.
Peppercorn.
And they
Can't
get
remember.
married and have 9 kids.
Yep, only.
Pro-life.
Very
And
pro-life.
Squints is pro-life.
That's right.
And so I was a big baseball guy and movie guy, so I had seen Field of Dreams. So when James Earl Jones ends up being the guy that owns the house with the big dog and the sand, I'm just like, this is awesome. This is all coming together.
Here's the thing that's interesting about The Sandlot. The best parts of that movie are not the baseball parts. It's the like just 10-year-old boys goofing around.
Yeah,
which-
the
Getting
Coca-Cola
into trouble.
bottles
Yeah.
and all of that. It's very nostalgic because that America is gone.
Yeah.
So that's a good transition into from the Sandlot and the comforts of that to Roe v. Wade and Dobbs. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the 8 fruits of Dobbs. There is a virus going on throughout the United States, and many Republicans have contracted it. Many vaccinated Republicans have contracted it. They've had the pro-life vaccine, but for some reason it didn't take. It's like the COVID one. We're supposed to walk around and apologize for the Supreme Court who gave us Roe. We didn't vote on it. Women didn't vote on it. So they create this, in Ginsburg words, bad law. It's a disaster. 64 million unborn Americans dead. Post-abortive women totally ignored. Exodus of abortion workers out of the abortion industry. Whistleblowers everywhere. They're all ignored. And finally, the Supreme Court does a good thing. It's not a heroic thing because they gave it to us, but a much more diverse Supreme Court than the all-male Supreme Court that gave us Roe in 1973 overturns Roe last year. So we're at the 1-year anniversary this weekend. And I think we all remember where we were. I think a lot of Republicans were sitting there and maybe their kid or their spouse or their buddy came in and was like, they overturned Roe versus Wade. And a lot of Republicans were like, great. Now what am I going to say? And we've helped correct some of that. But we're supposed to walk around. The virus is that we walk around and apologize for the Supreme Court correcting their error.
Yeah, the night before the court heard the oral arguments in the Dobbs case, I spoke at a rally in front of the last remaining abortion facility in the state of Mississippi. And after we got done, there were reporters there from across the country, and an NBC News reporter asked me something to the effect of, well, okay, if Roe goes away, what are you going to do to start helping women who are pregnant and they're in need? And I kind of explained, we don't need to start doing anything. I talked about the pregnancy help centers that outnumber abortion facilities, how they're not relying on federal funds. There's the generosities there. All of the resources that are available I talked about. I think I gave a good and articulate answer. And the response from the reporter was, yeah, but, what are you going to do to help these women? And so I kind of repeated and expanded upon the answer. And then they asked me again, and it's kind of like Peter after the resurrection, where it's like, and he was distressed, why did you ask me a third time?
Right.
And so I just said, look, you can ask me the same question all night long, and we're going to have the same answer. We don't have anything to be ashamed of. We're not turning these women out to the streets. There are maternity homes, there are pregnancy centers, there are medical professionals. Everything they need is there and in place already. We're not getting ready. The pro-life movement is ready and has been ready, and we're not going to start doing anything. We're going to continue to do it. And I think we need that sort of unapologetic approach to it. This is what we hoped for decades, and thanks be to God it's here, and it's been here for a year, and we've got a lot to show for it.
Yeah. It was just an assumed attitude that we were all supposed to have, that we're supposed to be apologetic, we're supposed to be very, very mourning of the loss of Roe rather than mourning the loss of the lives over the last several decades at this point. By babies' lives lost, but also a lot of mothers who have lost their lives to abortions, and people who have lost their souls too, just because of this.
Yeah, and it's abortion ultimately is a sin. I have compassion though, and this is good a year later after Dobbs. I understand the knee-jerk reaction from the pro-choice guy. So you passively support abortion. Maybe actively, but most of it is they need that choice. What's the matter with you? Women, you're going to have all these unwanted kids. And so when Roe was overturned, the pro-choice woman or man who's like, disaster, okay? Who was the famous reporter that told the Supreme Court, I hope they're going to, you need to go to Alito's house and he can raise all these unwanted kids running around. So women are going to die, Hillary's first tweet. Just that knee-jerk reaction of it's all bad, it's awful, we're going to have dead women in the street, we're going to have all these little poor, the eugenics stuff came out, where are these poor black women going to go for their abortions? I don't think you can ask that. All that, if you're the pro-choice guy and, you're outraged maybe until 4th of July last year, you're like, nothing really happened. It doesn't really affect me. Nothing changed. I didn't see a dead woman. Whoopi Goldberg said we're going to go back to where we're stepping over dead women in the bathroom doing self-induced abortions. And even like the pro-choice, we were like, I don't really remember those days. Like when I went to the movies and there were dead women in the bathroom.
But self-induced abortions are a good thing. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah, we'll get into that because now everybody's pro self-induced abortion with no doctor. But that the sky didn't fall.
No, all those talking points, they were around for decades, and they worked only until, there have been a number of states, but only until one state protects unborn children, suddenly all of those myths disappear. Where are the dead women? Where are the women? I haven't seen one that's been investigated for having a miscarriage. I haven't seen a woman who's had the police, the FBI knocking. The FBI's knocking on our doors from time to time, but they're not knocking on someone's door to investigate why they had a miscarriage. All of those fear-mongering talking points, you're not hearing so much about them anymore, and that's going to be a long-term win for continued efforts to protect unborn lives in more states.
Don't you think it's good for young people? Because every movement has generations, We're millennials. Barely. But there's a lot of pro-life millennials. There's a lot of baby boomers who gave us all this crap and then they had a reversion. But young people, Generation Z, if you support abortion, and many of them do, although they're the most pro-life generation at that age that we've ever had, which we did a podcast on, you hear Jane Fonda and all your heroes, and they're like, we're not going back to the days where we took coat hangers in the back alley. And the Generation Z kids are like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's awful. We're not going back there. They don't say, when did that actually happen?
Yeah, right. I know I always wondered that and questioned that. And then after learning from people like, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, the late Dr. Bernard Nathanson, that they fudged all those numbers, they made all those, a lot of those stories were completely made up just to push the agenda.
Was genius.
Yeah.
Back alley was genius.
Push the agenda. But I think that I know that for me, when I first got involved, a lot of us were saying at that point, we don't know what it's like to be in a non-Roe versus Wade world because we were born after the fact. And so we can look at that and say, wow, our parents legally could have had us killed. Mm-hmm. And now these newer generations can live in a post-Roe world. And of course, depending on the state that you live in, can say, my parents didn't have the right to kill me if I lived in X amount of state. And hopefully it'll be all 50 states sooner rather than later.
That's a great point. It's not an option. And I think everybody, but especially younger kids, if you're 20 years old, you're like, I mean, now, if my mom lived in Texas or Tennessee or Florida or Mississippi, it's just not an option. Yeah. And that's the genius of the heartbeat bill. By the time you figure out you're pregnant, there's a heartbeat, or cardiac activity.
Electrical cardiac activity. Sean, please correct yourself.
Which for me personally, I support my own electrical cardiac activity. I want it to continue. So we can call it that. We can call it a heartbeat. I just want the heart to keep going.
Heart tones, and as one of the workers put it.
It was great when all that started happening. These just normal cardiologists were coming out going, this is just total BS. And then one guy said, if you want to use cardiac activity, you could probably go back to like 22 days. But I don't think they want to do that. I don't think they want to get into that. That doesn't help the argument. But it's a really great point of, it's just like we've experienced with women who have had an abortion with the overturning of Roe, is I would have never done it if it were illegal. So it's legal, made it easy, law of the land, totally easy and understandable to talk yourself into it. And then overturned, controversial, and I don't think I would have done it. Maybe I would have looked at those other options. So I think that was the negative side of Roe, but on the positive side of Dobbs, I think a lot of people will be like, so your baby at 10 weeks has dignity in Texas, but not in San Diego?
Yeah, they'll see the inconsistency of it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the basically the top fruits of overturning Roe. The first one being the unofficial first one is that the sky didn't fall, the world didn't end, people got up and went to work the next day. It wasn't the end of civilization as we know it.
They've now given birth to babies that they love and adore and are delighted to have.
And that is number one on our list.
Yeah, so tens of thousands of lives have been estimated to be saved, as we knew would happen once the Dobbs decision was made favorable in our favor, and more importantly, babies' lives' favor. So low-range estimates extrapolate that more than 60,000 lives have been saved. Some of the more middle ground estimates would suggest somewhere around 90,000. And I know that the Susan B. Anthony list, which is formerly List, now Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, is one of those really amazing groups. They their goal is to put female pro-life women in office, which is wonderful. And they actually estimate up to 200,000 just this past year of lives that have been saved. And that's just babies' lives, not counting women and fathers who have been spared, hopefully, from this tragedy.
It's also, a lot of the numbers are from the last quarter of 2022. So they're conservative, but they're really so low that they're inaccurate, but on a positive side. We know as states report it, the birth rate's going up. The birth rate as a country is going up. But Texas, our friend Joe Poyman, their estimate, if I remember correctly, he can email us, but in January, they announced that since the heartbeat bill in Texas, so it was about 18 months, that the conservative estimate was 100,000 babies that were born in Texas alone, okay? Counting back to heartbeat, then Dobbs overturns Roe. This is phenomenal, but it makes sense. Texas was doing 365 abortions a day at our peak, okay, which I think was 6 years ago. So it just makes sense. We have talked about, and it's totally true, travel is a deterrent. We know that from the Obama years. Distance is a deterrent. And so we're going to continue to see the story on MSNBC where the woman is like, and I was in Jackson, Mississippi, and I walked to Chicago, and I was mugged, and I got diagnosed with cancer on the way. And then finally I had a doctor, do the abortion. And he saved my life. So we're going to get those sort of tug at the heart stories. But the reality is the majority of women won't travel to have an abortion.
Right. And there's a sort of a what to say when element here, because as we air this podcast, as we record this podcast, yesterday there were babies all over the country born because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Today there are babies. Tomorrow there will be babies born due to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And once you can see those babies, like we dehumanize them because we can't see them, right? Now that you see them, they're born, they're cute, they're going to grow up, they're going to have amazing, incredible lives,
or they may become criminals.
Ooh.
But they were given a shot.
Yeah, they were given a shot. And as you've said before, we root for the underdog. And you just look at a child, and I don't think there are many on the other side of this issue who you say, look at this baby. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that this baby is alive and sucking her thumb and making the cute sounds and like trying to roll over and kind of doing it but kind of not, and she's working on it? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I know there are some hearts that are hard enough to say that's a bad thing, but I don't think 90+% of Americans are willing to say that this little boy or girl being here is a bad thing.
But that's too personal, because one of the advantages of being pro-abortion, pro-choice, whatever you want to call it, is that you can love humanity but hate people. So when you talk about humanity and mankind and women's rights, it's easy to discard people. But if you're looking at a baby, as we have done many times, who was going to be aborted and now they're alive, or they're playing t-ball, or they're disabled, or they get straight A's, or they'll probably fail out of school, or their dad is on crack, or their dad is president of a bank, whatever it is, it's personal. And that's where this has to be. That's what's so beautiful about the birth rate going up.
Yeah.
Because the alternative, and by the way, none of those kids have been bussed up to the Supreme Court, as many people wanted, to raise their unwanted children. They have been wanted, and that's the experience of the pro-life movement, is it has helped millions of women parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're not alone.
Yeah. No, they're not alone. And obviously none of us can play God. We cannot determine whether or not this person has value or their life should continue on based on whether or not they are going to be successful, or they're going to be a criminal, or they're going to have a really, really bad upbringing. They're not going to have a mom and a dad who love each other and who love that child. There's no way to predict that, but it's not for us to say that. But I always say that there are some mothers, sadly, out there who have said, I wish I would have aborted you, to the face of their child sometimes. But I always say no mother in her right mind is going to regret having her child, no matter how hard of a situation it was when that baby was conceived, when that baby was born. And that's just more opportunity for us as a community to step up and reach out to those mothers and to encourage the fathers, to step up into their role as father, as protector, as a loving partner to the mother of their child.
It's a great point. And if there's 100 people connected to abortion in any given clinic, we're interested in all 100 of them.
Yeah.
Like, it's not.
And we hear like, well, there shouldn't be any unwanted children from the abortion supporters. I agree with that. There shouldn't be any unwanted children. But of the phrase unwanted children, you don't get rid of the children. You get rid of the unwanted part. And in fact, there's a family that wants every child.
I just think that gets way too much attention too. I mean, you can have unwanted pregnancies, like, oh no, and maybe women they want to have an abortion. They're tempted to have an abortion. That's what we do. But not when the baby's born.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, most of them don't even make it past the ultrasound. I mean, they're not monsters. We treat women like these cold-hearted, I don't want this baby and I got to get rid of it at any cost. I will fly from Orlando to Sacramento through the night. I need my money. Let's go. That's not how they operate. They have to be like these cruel, senseless, cold, I could care less. And that is not our encounter of women in the parking lots of abortion facilities.
I think it's a distinction in reality between actual people and celebrities, because I think this sort of comes in where you see like this, the actress get up there and I wouldn't be here to win this award if I hadn't had an abortion. There's no other scenario in which you'd be like, and if I hadn't robbed that homeless guy, I wouldn't have the money to start my tech startup. You know, there's no other case where we suggest that we can do harm to somebody.
And nobody says it about their born kid.
Right.
I would have won this Oscar 5 years ago, but little Johnny was such a pain in the neck, I couldn't get a nanny.
Yeah, and none of the, I mean, you've got the actors who are saying these sorts of things, and I'm not sure how many of the million abortions every year they account for, but I'm pretty confident that, you know, the vast majority of women getting abortions are not coming back later. I'm not hearing the testimonies of like, thank God I had that abortion. It doesn't match the everyday experience of people who make this decision.
But we know that because we work with post-abortive women, and that's not how post-abortive women talk.
Right.
When they hear Cecile Richards, when she was CEO at Planned Parenthood, get up at the DNC and say, my husband and I had an abortion, it just wasn't a big deal. Wasn't a big deal at all. No woman who's been through an abortion believes that. It's a disconnect, and I think it's forced, whether it's Hollywood or the abortion industry themselves. It's kind of, you know... The women seeking abortion don't have that militant attitude that the abortion advocates have of just at all cost. This is what makes you free. It's what your identity as a woman is, your ability to have an abortion. So
Free on demand without apology.
yes, and it's a very cold stance. And now it's like, that's not true. Because we got essentially 20 states that are abortion free. Okay. This next one is a lot of fun. And this is a big fruit of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. It brought back one of my favorite topics, the sex strike.
I feel like we need sort of a graphic.
We don't need a graphic for the sex strike.
No, it would have like the red siren light like on the top of a police car. It's like,
It's
sex strike update. Dun, dun,
update.
dun, 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 dun.
No, it's a flag. It's a sex strike flag.
Ooh.
Like it goes up all the poles throughout America. It's like,
Is it like on the rainbow trans flag?
Yes.
Is that the new stripe on
Yeah,
it?
well, I'm sure. I don't know if the rainbow trans people are for the sex strike, but they call for it. So the sex strike is to punish men. Okay. I think. So that's why they do the sex strike. However, I personally am for, not personally, actually, I'm married. The sex strike doesn't apply. If you're married, the sex strike doesn't apply to you, you know, and all that. You work that out amongst yourselves. But as a whole, we absolutely need a sex strike. We don't have a promiscuity issue in our country. We're just doing great. Our culture is totally healed. We don't have any, fatherless homes or anything like. We don't have any pregnant teens out of wedlock. We're good. We don't need a sex strike. No, we need one. It would be great.
Yeah, and I think we would maybe not refer to it so much as the sex strike, but as chastity. What a concept.
Yes, chastity.
Actually thinking about your actions, prior to what a concept. Yeah.
If you wait to have sex wait till marriage to have sex, you won't get like some illness. You won't die, And I think people realize that chastity is making a comeback, and so is like waiting for marriage and all of that. So there is sort of this reversal thing from the sexual revolution. That's just now there's pornography and gay marriage and the trans people and the drag queens, and you have all this stuff where it's essentially not very exciting. It's like just perversion. It's like just sexual perversion, which has been around, since the beginning of man. So I think a sex strike is good. I know this was an instant response to Dobbs. Did anybody take time to read Alito's opinion? It's brilliant. It's brilliant. He doesn't call for a sex strike, but the response wasn't to read Alito's opinion or to even just sort of get mad. It was to call for a sex strike, which I 100% support for our culture.
And even before Dobbs, even before the court looked the way that it looks right now, we had the economist Philip Levine arguing that sexual behavior will change in response to abortion being unavailable. Back then, when he was writing this paper, it was just sort of a theory, the idea of Roe being overturned was just sort of in theory. But now that it's happened, we're seeing the fulfillment of that prediction, that there's different incentives and there's different disincentives, and behavior is modified, which means that, the babies that have been born the first 6 or 9 months after Dobbs were overturned, those are babies that were conceived during the Roe era. But once Roe ended, suddenly you have changing behaviors, and that means that the number of babies that are being aborted, the number of babies that are saved from abortion is going to increase. And it might be because they're saved at a 40 Days for Life vigil. It might be they're saved because of a state law, but they're also being saved because women are aware of, and men are aware of, what they're getting into when they make decisions that could possibly lead to a pregnancy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it was a great irony that the sex strike does what for a long time our culture did, which is connect sex to procreation, which is the point of it.
Yes.
And so we've tried to sort of divorce those two, whether it be with contraception or just our culture in general, the hookup culture that's no big deal, the sleep around. And when Roe was overturned, it was like, but what if we really want an abortion? Because I don't want to have a kid with you, right? Like, we're just having fun. So they called for the sex strike, and I think that was...
And that's what the Casey v. Planned Parenthood decision or Planned Parenthood v. Casey decision in 1992, the Supreme Court came out and basically said, we're going to keep Roe. It doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense then, doesn't make any sense now. But, we've got 2 decades here where people have been able to rely on abortion as backup birth control. And that's exactly what's happened. And now that sort of, I don't want to call it a safety net because abortion is the least safe thing in the world, but that sort of illusion of a safety net is gone. And there's going to have to be, and there is a response taking place.
I think also the term sex strike makes people very comfortable or uncomfortable, and there is no middle ground. And that's another reason I support it.
We need the logo and the graphic. I think.
No, we do not.
We're
logoed out.
I think of like the striking miners. There's like a pickaxe and there's like the coal wagon.
And they have a button. They wear buttons. Sex strike.
It's got to be like super cheesy, like old fashioned, like the picture of a bed with like an X over it or something. There's got to be
and like day 67 of the sex strike.
Chastity belts could come back. Like, why not?
Yeah. There's a lot of weird fashion out there. Would that really be that, fringe? I had one last thing on the sex strike, but I think we can move on somehow. We did a podcast. It wasn't a whole podcast on a sex strike, but I think you, in your greatness of research, you documented like previous sex strikes. In that podcast,
yeah.
We don't have the podcast in front of us. You can Google it.
It's the logo we need at the graphic.
We need the graphic.
It's a recurring segment.
But I had never really heard of a sex strike until I was like an adult in the pro-life movement. I think they did one in Texas in 2013 when they did the HB2 stuff, and the liberals went crazy, so they demanded the sex strike. But abortion is it originally started, I think, in the 70s or 60s with something. I don't remember what it was. It had nothing to do with abortion or contraception or anything. It had something, I forget what it was, but there's a history of sex strikes that I don't encourage anyone to Google or look into, but
be careful.
Steve did, and it's in the podcast. Okay, number 3. So number 1, tens of thousands of lives have been saved. Again, very conservative estimates. Number 2, chastity is back, thanks to the great people who orchestrated the sex strike. And number 3, this is, I think, a surprise for some people. More abortion facilities closed in 2022 than any other year since 2013. 2013 was a big year. It's when this place closed.
Yeah, that was a year where a lot of state-level pro-life legislation took effect. But now with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we saw 43 different abortion facilities close their doors and go out of business just in the first month after the Dobbs case overturned Roe v. Wade. So 43 in the first month. There have been many more since then. And the other thing that is awesome is we have all kinds of abortion facilities that are desperately trying to hang on. They're in pro-life states. Unborn children are protected. They're doing whatever they can. They're trying to sell, gender hormones. They're trying to sell enough contraception to stay open, and they're really struggling to do it. And so that's why it wasn't just like a one-time thing. Dobbs overturns Roe, and bam, they start closing. They're continuing to close. There's a cumulative effect to Dobbs. There are a number of states where they're just praying, hoping there'll be some new court case, some new legislation that'll keep the abortion facility open. But many of them are running to the abortion sanctuary states. And this is so naive because here in Texas, they're all going to, here in Texas, they are all going to New Mexico. And the last abortion facility that I talked about earlier in Mississippi, I think has gone to New Mexico. And everybody is relocating to New Mexico or to Illinois. And I don't know, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm Texas, right? Like most of the state's population is in the middle or the eastern half.
We're
right?
11 hours from El Paso right now. Like everybody's like, well, they're going to be on the border. You're like, the border? First off, you'd probably be killed. You drive out there now with all the border crisis. But it's like, you drive to El Paso? That's 11 hours away.
Yeah, and then maybe an hour past that to like Santa Teresa or Las Cruces or wherever you are. This is a place where Mark Cavalier, 40 Days for Life guy in that region, they had closed, I can't remember how many, 2, 3, 4 different abortion facilities. Almost every abortion facility in that area had gone out of business prior to Dobbs. And now you're going to relocate like 3, 4, 5 abortion facilities from other parts of the country there and suspect that there's a market that will be able to sustain that all? I don't think so. And I don't think so in Southern Illinois either. Illinois is 2 states. My wife is from Chicago and we got married. I said, Laura, what's the rest of Illinois like? She's like, I don't know.
Bunch of rednecks.
Yeah, she had no idea. And so you're looking at like Carbondale, Illinois becoming this abortion mecca. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Southern Illinois is like Texas or Alabama or Mississippi. It's beautiful. But the interesting thing, you mentioned market, which is what this really boils down to in a post-Roe America. It's why 40 Days for Life is built for post-Roe, because we're market driven. Interestingly, which people don't look at, but a real company would, abortion was legal and promoted and great in the great state of Texas. The Lubbock Planned Parenthood abortion facility closed. Mm-hmm. Texas Tech is there.
Okay.
33,000 are at Tech.
Known for their high STD rate. So,
which is true.
Which
We're
comes,
Aggies now they're picking on Texas Tech. Bunch of pagan, so they need
STDs
they
and
need
abortions.
A sex drive, you Red Raiders. But major university, right? Small in Texas, but major university in other places. I think there's 35,000 students at Texas Tech. They couldn't support an abortion facility. Not to mention Lubbock is in the middle of nowhere, so you draw all that business. That closed. That's why they're underestimating how many abortions they're going to do when they go to the border of New Mexico or to the border of Illinois, the border of Colorado. They're in the middle of nowhere.
And here's another great factor about this, which I wouldn't have thought until I found the research. But if you've got, say you're in whatever city, USA, I think every state has a Springfield. You're in Springfield, and there's 2 abortion facilities, and one of them closes. You might think, okay, well, the other one is just going to reap all of the benefits. You're going to have the same number of abortions, but just this location will double their numbers. And that's not the case. The abortion rate in that community, just one closure, even if there's 1, 2, 3 other abortion facilities, the number of abortions in that community still goes down, and the number of babies saved from abortion goes up.
This is so great because it highlights how people in our country just assume how abortion works. Like it's McDonald's goes to a town and Burger King goes to a town and Taco Bell goes to a town, and McDonald's closes the Burger King and they close the Taco Bell, and that McDonald's shoots up. That's how it would work, right? There's only one fast food place here. It doesn't work that way with abortion. Abortion is different. And people just assume that everybody's clamoring to get an abortion. And in this case, that moving 8 hours or getting in your car or driving or even flying is not a deterrent. It's extremely naive. We're going to have a lot of closed abortion facilities on these border states in the next 5 years.
There's going to be a lot of startups where they go and then we're getting started and we need some donations. Like I don't love it, but it's wild to see these for-profit abortion facilities that are raising donations. Like what other for-profit company is doing a fundraiser? It's kind of embarrassing. Like you need a bake sale. What is going on here? And they're really struggling. And I think they're going to I think there's going to be an arc where, hey, we're new in town. We're protecting women's rights. And then they're gone in 6 months.
Well, we know at 40 Days to have a successful abortion business, you can't just do abortions. You have to do a lot of abortions. And the elephant in the room in this is the shortage of abortion doctors who now can't just travel to Austin or Dallas where it's somewhat close, major airports. It's like, I've got to fly into El Paso and then drive 2 hours. Okay. So, number 3, more abortion facilities closed in 2022 than any other year since 2013. And on the flip side of that, 40 Days for Life added cities despite losing so many cities for that reason, the best reason, which is the abortion facility closes. So we were still able to add cities in post-Roe. Okay. The next one is, we kind of touched on this, but abortion is just illegal in many states. And we made this point earlier where if you have Roe v. Wade overturned, you'll have all these trigger laws that go into effect. Texas, Missouri was the first, Texas was the second, where essentially abortion is illegal. Then you have these other states that have abortion bans with exceptions. You have other states that then all of a sudden implemented the heartbeat bill at 6 weeks. So essentially we have about 18, you could argue 20 states that are either abortion-free or have significantly cut back their abortions. And this means you have abortion-free states. It now means we have abortion-free regions. And I believe if we have abortion-free regions, those can be expanded because the sky doesn't fall and we can have an abortion-free country. It becomes possible. And we know that a year later. You know, a year ago, it was all of these backwoods pro-life states are actually going to see what happens and they're going to start to, crawl back a little. We haven't seen that. We saw recently Florida do the 6-week heartbeat bill. It's a big state. People don't realize. I mean, Planned Parenthood is a monster. You cannot be McDonald's and all of a sudden it's illegal for you to be in Florida or Texas. Those are massive markets.
But abortion is only 3% of their services. I came on this podcast to remind you guys. So that means that they're actually still thriving because it's only a small percent. And that was actually what was funny to me was we had an abortion facility in Austin that was boasting all over social media after the heartbeat law was passed that they were not going anywhere, that they were still open, they were still ready for women, they were still there for women. And what was awesome was I remember thinking that day, this is going to be great to look back on and laugh at. And so I screenshotted that social media thing. And then just a few months later, now they didn't say they were closing. They weren't closing, they were moving. And I'm like, you're closing. You're leaving this facility, you're leaving this state, you're packing up. They tried to open a couple of times in New Mexico, but they were leaving, they were closed. And I loved making a meme to juxtapose the we're not going anywhere to the we're closed and we're no longer offering services. And I'm like, but why? You're a women's facility. You have all these other, what was great was there were actually comments on their social media pages and their reviews saying, I don't understand. Like, I go to you guys for my XYZ. Why are you closing? This makes me really mad. And what happened to? And I was like, we don't even have to say it. They're saying it themselves.
The problem with that is that they originally weren't saying it. They were just lying. Like the Jackson, Mississippi clinic, the cotton candy clinic, is really weird looking. It's pink. Just odd.
Very cotton candy. Yeah.
It's the only time I'm usually very professional, I would say. Not on the podcast, but when I go speak in front of an abortion facility, that's the only time I just kind of started making fun of the way the abortion clinic looks. And all their volunteers were out there, very hostile, more hostile in Mississippi than Los Angeles, because in Los Angeles, they just don't care. They're like, everybody supports abortion. But in Mississippi, they were like getting in your face and all this stuff. And I was like, this looks like it's the headquarters of like a cotton candy company. The corporate headquarters where they drive into the pink building. Anyways, they went out and said, we're not leaving. We are here for the poor minority women of Mississippi. You will not be forgotten. The day after they overturned Roe, they moved. The day after. It's like, so they already had the U-Haul reserved. I mean,
they were doing the fundraiser that we talked about where
totally
help
full
us
of crap.
move. Yeah.
They don't care about women's rights or poor minority women. They care about abortion. As they should, I guess. They're an abortion facility, but don't claim not to be.
But this is where the region thing is so great, because you're in Mississippi. Now you're not going to go to Louisiana. You're not going to go to Texas. You're not going to go to Alabama. If you're after 6 weeks, you're not going to go to Georgia. Now you're not going to go to Florida. You're not going to go to Tennessee. You're not going to go to Kentucky. This is a really accumulative effect here where the travel, as we've talked about, women don't travel anyway, but they're certainly not going to travel, from Mississippi to New York in any sort of formidable numbers.
No, it's a great point. And distance is on our side, as is history, I think, with the further. I mean, look at what we know in a year.
Yeah.
2 years, a decade. It's gold.
And do you know what I've noticed too? There have been still on the college campuses, which of course Austin has a few of those. There's still women that are attending these college campuses.
Right.
So I guess they're able to have an education. I say we are able to have an education and
your
do
pronouns
things.
Right. That's very important to get your pronouns
Heather
right.
identifies as a woman.
That's right. Without having an abortion. So it's kind of going back to your point earlier with that there's just going to be, the end is near, the world is over without abortion. And yet we as women are still able to pursue our careers, to pursue our dreams. We don't have to have an abortion in order to go to, which is completely insulting to women anyway.
We can't emphasize that enough. The sky not falling. I think the sky not falling also works against us on other issues. How many times do we see, you could take gay marriage, Obama, anti-gay marriage, California votes it down twice in a referendum in 2008. We're like, we're not going to have gay marriage in our country. And then we get it. People were outraged. I don't know. I think they won so handedly in that. But corporations start training on it. You got to legally give insurance to Bob and Joe. They're married. You got to train on it so there's no bigotry against and the same thing with the trans. And you're sitting there. I have a relative who got out of the SEALs, high ranking in the SEALs, because he got tired of the trainings and the train stuff. But he's the exception. I think most people just like, this is the way it is. I'm a mid-level executive, mid-level manager, or I'm an executive, and I'm just going to go along with it. And that works in the negative in that sense, in our opinion. But it works. It also applies to abortion. It definitely applies to abortion. And I just think you get worn out on somebody in the office or whatever being like, we need abortion through 40 weeks. And Dobbs happened 5 years ago. And you're like, can we move on? The sky didn't fall. So anyways, okay. Our next topic, next on our list, some of the fruit is, we mentioned this earlier, 40 Days for Life grew and became more effective, which we didn't predict.
Yeah, absolutely. So you may have thought like we wouldn't have as many 40 Days for Life prayer vigils, but in fact we had an increased number in this past year for the fall and the spring, and people could definitely focus their presence on a smaller number. So if you're one of those cities that has multiple abortion facilities, maybe a couple of them closed or one of them closed, so people were encouraged to drive a little bit further to the one that was available. Which then means you're likely to have a stronger vigil because you've got more people descending upon one facility to hold peaceful prayer vigils outside of that facility, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's. The growth was a pleasant surprise. Okay, one of the positives, and we've seen this in the media coverage that 40 Days for Life has gotten, people are talking about abortion.
Yeah, and there's nothing that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry fear more than people talking about abortion. We've got all of the the euphemisms that are designed to prevent talk about abortion. Whether you're talking about the unborn child, okay, it's a fetus, it's a product of conception, it's a blob of tissue, it's a lump of cells. I mean, how many we could probably, off the top of our heads, come up with 6 more euphemisms. They don't use the word abortion, it's choice, it's reproductive rights, it's reproductive justice, it's reproductive freedom. Everything is couched in these vague terms because they could they thrive when abortion is in the margins, in the shadows, when it's not talked about directly. And now it's being talked about directly, which Planned Parenthood hates. They can't stand it. President Reagan said, all meaningful change in America begins at the dinner table. And these conversations are happening around the dinner table because abortion is back in the headlines. They have to discuss it. And when people learn about abortion, they reject abortion. We've looked at the public polling research that shows things that are completely incongruent, that a majority of Americans wants abortion through the end of the first trimester, and yet a majority of Americans also want to see abortion prohibited once the baby's heart begins beating at 18 to 22 days. These things cannot be reconciled. And so that means that we've got a lot of upside here. There's a lot that every conversation we have about abortion, talking about the baby's heart beginning beating, every conversation we have about the baby having his or her own unique DNA genetic code that determines sex, hair color, athletic ability, natural athletic ability, all those things. Every time these discussions are being had and people are being educated, they are going to become more pro-life. They're going to see that we are the compassionate side. When it's hidden and it's euphemisms, I remember back when, I've talked about this before on the podcast, that we had this big crusade against my alma mater, the University of Wisconsin, trying to open up a late-term abortion facility. And there was a big public hearing on it. And we had here's the 3 pro-life testimonies, and here are the 3 pro-abortion testimonies. And, our side kind of came in and we had a very reasoned and rational approach, which was, we're going to talk about facts, we're going to talk about science, we're going to talk about statistics. The abortion industry didn't end run around all of that. It was all these wild, crazy, emotional stories that probably didn't happen. And, They were avoiding talking about the actual facts. But now when we have to talk about the facts, people are going to have to start considering these things. And we don't just have science and reason on our side. We also have the emotional side, too. Those babies that we talked about who are being born, the moms who were able to triumph over the difficult situation. All of these talking points line up on our side when we actually get to have the conversation.
Yeah, ours is the feel-good side. Mm-hmm. In addition to being biologically and scientifically accurate, which is a bonus. We became the compassionate side, and I've heard pro-choice people say it's screaming about infanticide and abortion at 35 weeks is not positive. It's not a positive thing, and we have a positive thing. One of the surprises in that you mentioned, just the whole discussion of abortion. What I have been surprised at is it has been divided in pop culture. And for instance, you had Bill Maher, who said this is just different and abortion is different. And most, Europe would be the most conservative state in the union. I didn't know that. And then Bill Maher has a show where he smokes weed with some dude. And somebody sent me the clip and they're getting high. And he's like, it kills the baby. Everybody knows that's the point of the abortion. It kills the baby. Of course, abortion is murder. And if I were a pro-lifer, I would say abortion is murder. I believe it's murder. The difference is I think it's okay to murder an unborn child. He said, I may have to deal with that one day, almost inciting his own judgment. But he said, I may be very wrong about that. That's not an easy position, but it's murder. I'm just for it. You had Dave Chappelle.
I was going to say, the comedians are really coming out, and multiple of them.
It's good. It's good. And you never have that, right?
Yeah.
You never have that. You definitely didn't have it with gay marriage. You don't have it with these pivotal cultural moments. But abortion is different. And you had Dave Chappelle. There's another comedian. His name is slipping my mind. I don't know who he is, but he's very, very famous. And he added a bit on abortion. And somebody sent it to me. It's crude, but he's like, what do we think? I mean, the woman goes in, she's got the baby. The woman comes out. It's just the woman. What the bleep happened to the baby? Something happened to the baby. Oh yeah, we killed it. And he's got this new bid on it just because of Dobbs. I thought that would happen. I just thought it would all be pro-abortion, and it hasn't been.
Yeah,
So,
I did too. And that's got to be awkward for the audience members too, because a lot of them want to sit there and be like, yeah,
but we
listen to
know
this.
but we know what many don't, which is a lot of the audience thinks the same thing.
Right.
Because
Right.
they don't want to talk about abortion and be like, hey, I like having my ultrasound picture from my kids.
Yeah.
Like, is that wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying abort them a month before then.
Yeah.
And all these stand-up bits too, they have sort of this flow to them where they're building and like Dave Chappelle's like pro-abortion talking point. And this is an interesting thing because for the last however many years, comedy has been dead, right? Like you get up there and you say like, and Trump, Russia, he's orange. And then like everyone's like,
yeah. Boring.
And so Chappelle kind of leads with this thing is like, yeah, and I think women need a right to choose. And everyone's like, yeah. And they're like on their high horse. They're full virtue signaling, peacocking out there. And then suddenly he drops like that, it's killing the baby. When I get an abortion, I want a dead baby. And they're like, oh. That's not where I thought this was going.
I think he says like, can I take it with me? I mean, it just goes on and on. But
it's dark, but at least it's making the point that we've been making all along.
Yeah. and you have that in The Godfather too, where you aborted my son and all this stuff. It's been in pop culture, but I didn't think with the overturning of Roe, there would be even a remotely reasonable voice out there, but there has been, thanks to the comedians. Okay. The next big piece of fruit is that the world has taken notice. I know when I went over to see Robert and speak at the March for Life in London, all about Roe. And that was 3 months after Dobbs. And they were just pumped. Like, we can end abortion. America, who shipped abortion around the world. America, who gave Latin America Pro Familia, which is just Planned Parenthood in Latin America. America that is the great Satan that is going around spreading their evil culture around the world. They ended abortion in the world's mind. They don't understand it's not over. But that whole notion that we overturned our federal law is absolutely phenomenal. It has sent shockwaves throughout the world. You were last month, Steve, in Canada at the Canadian March for Life. Even the Canadians are optimistic, and they're like the most depressed people on earth. So it's just awesome to see because it becomes possible. And I think that is the role of the United States. And we need to show that you can be part of the West, not have abortion at 40 weeks, and the sun will still come up the next day.
Being an American, I lose sight of how much the rest of the world thinks about America. Like, we've got Day 41 magazine coming out this week, and Lourdes Varela has this beautiful piece about how 40 Days for Life transformed Guatemala, and like they renamed the government building like Pro-Life Hall. Pretty cool stuff, like remarkable things happening. I don't really know that. I'm glad it's happening. I don't think all that much in my day-to-day life about Guatemala, but in Canada, it's all they could talk about. They're putting out a Roe documentary in Canada about what will it take to have our Roe v. Wade overturning in Canada, and it was a great source of hope. And Lourdes has also talked about the great benefit here is we see the pressure from the U.S. coming on these other countries to accept abortion, even when they're pro-life cultures. And Lourdes says it's given a spine to these kind of wishy-washy legislators. Say, like, this isn't inevitable anymore.
It's really great, and most people didn't think that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. They were like, well, we're the embarrassment of the world. And then that was, to his credit, Bill Maher, when he was like, everybody thinks Europe is all progressive. All of us liberals in America were like, we need to be more like Europe. We need to be more like Europe. It's 12 weeks in Italy, 12 weeks in France.
It's 12 weeks in North Carolina now. And I think it was the New York Times talking about the extreme anti-abortion legislation being passed in North Carolina. Do you think of like France and
Germany?
Yeah.
They are extreme.
They're extremists.
Crazy.
Extreme anti-abortion.
It goes back to the earlier point, which is they're ill-equipped to talk about abortion now that we have to talk about abortion and we don't have the comfort of Roe. We don't have the nice cuddly blanket of Roe to hide under where it's like, it's the law of the land and I support the court's decision, and you just move on. We actually have to talk about why abortion is good or bad for a free society. And I feel we can make the arguments of why abortion is good for America better than 99% of Planned Parenthood workers. They're not good at articulating their point. And of course, we would be able to refute it. But they're ill-equipped. They're ill-equipped. And that leads to the next point, which is abortion becoming toxic for corporate America.
Yeah, for a while, all you would hear about from corporate America was abortion. They were going to pull all the filming out of Georgia and the woke CEOs offering to pay for the abortions. And that's kind of disappeared. If you haven't noticed it, it's because it's not being talked about anymore. Walgreens is running into all sorts of trouble. We've covered that. They're going to do abortions, but not in these states. And now they're getting boycotted by both pro-lifers
Both
and
sides.
abortion supporters.
Shareholders with CVS and Walgreens, I mean, those stocks have had a very, very rough 2023.
Yeah.
Can I throw one in there that's still fun?
Please do.
Bud Light. I mean, I think getting into the culture war should be at a healthy level. I think it's Chrysler that, like, from the beginning said, no politics, no nothing, we're making cars.
The Michael Jordan approach.
Correct. Republicans buy Nikes too. Jordan's a great quote. But the Bud Light thing is a big deal because Anheuser-Busch is traditionally a very sort of pro-American company. I hate Bud Light and Budweiser, so I feel fine saying this. I didn't have to boycott them because I literally don't think I've ever had a Bud Light.
Water's free.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, if you're drinking Bud Light as a legitimate beer, you've got other issues, okay? So, especially in the new craft beer world that we live in now. That's a big deal because they make a mistake and Matt Walsh, who we love, and everybody else says, you're about to be public enemy number one. A lot of blue-collar workers, a lot of, I think when I saw the demographics broke up, like per capita, Hispanic males are big Bud Light drinkers, okay? They believe in family. They're Catholic. They believe in, if they're a dude, they believe they're one. Even if they don't believe it, they know that's not true. So just that reaction, Bud Light's been hammered. I mean, this stuff never works. And it was orchestrated. It was easy. It was so uncomfortable with the Dylan dude on the can that it was just like, they're done. They've been doing, they're not done, but they got to the point last month where Bud Light was buying back beer that had gone stale.
Ooh.
Because it wasn't selling.
How do you know the difference? Bud Light.
Sorry,
I'm from Wisconsin.
You're from Wisconsin.
We're Miller State.
Yes. Anytime you ask somebody from Wisconsin, do you drink beer? They always say, I'm from Wisconsin. And like, the first time it happened to me, I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to think right now. Is that a yes? But I've never heard of that. Have you ever heard of a major corporation like buying back their own product because it was going bad, because it was sitting on the shelf?
No, I haven't heard of that. Though I will say a word of caution here. I think this is great news too, right? It's excellent that somebody is standing up and the other side, they make examples, right? They're not like, well, you can't go to this place because they use paper clips that were made in, Micronesia or whatever. They're picking a target, they're sticking with it, and they're like, we're not patronizing this because we want to send a message. And I think finally pro-lifers are doing that here and pro-family people with the Bud Light thing. But we've got to stick with it, right? Because who was on the other side of this, 7 or 8 years ago? Target. They're going to let dudes into their bathrooms. Oh, I'm never going to Target again. And 6 months pass, like, I really need a pair of sandals. I really need some sunscreen. And
Target was the first to do gay wedding registrations.
Okay.
And then they created however this looks, a gay section of Target. Yeah. And it's like, it's funny because I had some like gay people say, we didn't really ask for that stuff. Like, that makes me uncomfortable. Like, then I'm in the gay section. Everybody's like, you're gay. He's like, I don't really want everybody knowing I'm gay, when I'm in the grocery store. So it becomes just this woke thing. But you're right. I don't think the Bud Light thing will last. I don't think anybody does. But you never have that on the other side. Mm-hmm. You never have where 24% of sales of Bud Light, that company's a monster.
It's an example now, and that's why we see, you mentioned the shareholders at Walgreens.
I don't believe in Starbucks, and I don't drink Starbucks, But there's a lot of people that don't boycott Starbucks, even though they disagree with them, because they're like, it's the only one and it's the best coffee, which is true. But there's a million other crappy light beers you can go drink, or a bunch of good beers you could actually drink. And that's the difference when you look at the boycott. Those are boycotts that are successful. People that say, I'm never going to fly United ever again, and I live in Houston because the lady was mean to me. I'm like, well, you're just not going anywhere. I mean, that's the way it works, But it's not an airline. It's a beer, and I think that there are other examples out there that could be successful.
And rather than coming or going, I think this is spreading, right? Because Coca-Cola had a shareholder resolution, a pro-abortion shareholder resolution, and these things always win because they come through and they pound them through. And this pro-abortion shareholder resolution at Coke, it lost, and it didn't lose 51-49 or 60-40. It was 87-13 pro-life victory.
They're based in Georgia. I mean, Kemp got reelected handedly. That's so good. And Coke keeps going back and forth because they've always been like fiscally conservative Republicans, the Koch brothers, but they could care less about the Republican Party being pro-life. They went totally out of the culture wars politically, but they enter it as a company. And they go back and forth. We're never doing this ever again. And then 5 years later, they'll do something stupid like this. So Coke is just totally inconsistent with it. You know what's good is Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. No contest.
Texas company. Great drink. So, yeah, I understand that with Coke. But the woke CEOs paying for the average woman tells one person she's going to have an abortion. It ain't going to be the HR director.
Right. And I don't think that we don't even have to do, as pro-lifers, we don't even have to say a lot of women, whether they're pro-life, pro-abortion, in the middle, whatever, they're looking at this very offended because, okay, you'll pay for me to have an abortion, but I've not heard a word of paying for my labor and delivery. I've not heard a word of maternity leave having better options for women in the workplace. And so I think that having women, whether or not, they're on one side, whatever side they are on the issue of abortion, pointing out how unbelievably it's patriarchal, it's sexist, it's just obviously an agenda. We only want you here, back to work in 2 days.
It's been a long time since we've had the sexist card on this podcast. maybe like a couple of weeks, because it is a man's world. Like we're winning. We men are now winning all your sports.
Yeah, thanks.
We're winning Women of the Year award.
Where are the women winning the men's sports? That's what I want to know.
It's not going to happen. So, all that stuff, we're winning Women's of the Year awards. We're stealing your awards. We're stealing your sports. And we're convincing you that you're an equal in the process. Man's world, Steve.
I'm curious. It's been a year. I wonder how many times this corporate benefit of go travel out of state for an abortion has been used.
It's all posturing.
I do wonder that. Yeah.
No one's doing that at Amazon. No one's going to Bezos saying, I want my $7,000 so I can fly to California. And they know that. I think what's great and what is more of a disaster that'll get no media coverage and that real companies have to deal with when you get into benefits is it's not that example. It's Sally saying, I'm so glad they're paying for Jennifer's travel to abortion. My son has leukemia, and they said, this doctor over here is a lot better, but he's in Texas. Will you pay for that travel? No! Yeah, but my kid's going to die. Get out of here. This meeting's over. But if she goes to Texas, has an abortion, or goes to California, has an abortion, they'll pay for the travel.
How's that handled? Do you have to bring back the receipt for the travel? Like, I'm try to be a morally virtuous person, so I wouldn't do this. But I'd like a vacation to California.
Right.
Can you pay for that for me?
We talked about earlier this year, the woman who traveled to New Jersey. She chose life at the 40 Days for Life campaign, and the company, who shall remain nameless, would not pay for her return flight. So who did?
The 40 Days for Life people.
There we go. Okay. So just to review, the top 8 fruits since Dobbs overturned Roe. We will put them out there. Number 1, babies are being born. Tens of thousands of them, in fact, as conservative estimates. Chastity is back in the form of the sex strike. Number 3, more abortion facilities closed in 2022 than any year since 2013. Number 4, abortion is illegal or very difficult to find in massive regions across the country. Number 5, 40 Days for Life became more effective and got larger. Number 6, people are finally talking about abortion. Number 7, the rest of the world has taken notice. And number 8, abortion is becoming toxic to corporate America. I want to run through quickly as we tie this up in a bow. Here are the 5 reasons that the best is yet to come. So maybe a year from now in 2024, which will be an easy, smooth, great year for our country. Nothing will be controversial. Another presidential race. It'll be great. Okay, 5 reasons that the best is yet to come. Number 1, abortion is no longer a settled issue or law of the land. Number 2, elections have been hard, but real people get reelected, like Kemp, DeSantis, Abbott, DeWine, all just huge political victories, and they owned abortion and being pro-life. Number 3, the battle moved from Washington, where Planned Parenthood is strong, to the local level, where they are weak. Number 4, the backlash to overturning Roe will continue to fade as people get used to it. Number 5, the federal government can't get any more pro-abortion than it is now. And imagine what'll happen if somehow we have a pro-life president. So, which we had.
Possibilities are breathtaking.
More on the election. Yeah, we'll only do about 100 podcasts on the election next year, I'm sure. So please rate, review, share this podcast. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Steve. And we wish your family a very happy Dobbs anniversary. Hopefully you come to DC. Order Haywood's book, The Scalpel and the Soul. It is out today on June 20th when this podcast is released. And also, it's not too early to say happy 4th of July and God bless America. Thank you. Please rate, review, share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless. say.
Being